Okay, let's unpack this. We're jumping straight into a deep dive today. We're looking at Numbers chapter 35.
Mm-hmm. A really fascinating section.
Yeah, it's got some incredibly specific instructions given to Moses, right there on the plains of Moab, just across from Jericho.
Right, and it lays out this blueprint for ancient Israel dealing with some pretty fundamental stuff, land, who gets what, and this really intricate justice system.
Exactly. So at its core, we're seeing like two main things pop out initially. Provisions for the tribe of Levi, and then these really specific rules about killing accidental versus, intentional murder. It sets up a whole framework for justice and, interestingly, refuge.
That's where it gets really interesting, I think.
Yeah. So let's start with the Levites. The text jumps right into this practical issue. They didn't get a big chunk of land like the other tribes, right?
No, exactly. They were sort of spread out.
Yeah.
The command was for the Israelites to give the Levites towns from their own inheritances.
Right, from what they received. And not just the towns, but pasture lands around them, too.
And the specificity is kind of remarkable, isn't it? It's not just a vague, give them some space.
No, it's 48 towns total, spread all through the tribal lands.
48. And the pasture land details. Wow.
Yeah, tell us about that. It's like measured out precisely.
It really is. So first, you measure 1,500 feet out from the town wall in every direction, like a radius.
Okay, so a circle or maybe a square around the town.
Kind of the immediate area, but then there's another measurement on top of that. It talks about 3,000 feet on each side, east, south, west, north.
So a bigger square.
Exactly. A bigger square, 3,000 feet per side, with the town right in the middle. And that whole calculated area outside the initial bit was specifically for their livestock pasture land.
It's such a deliberate layout, almost geometric.
Yeah.
And how they decided which towns, that wasn't random either.
No, it was proportional. Basically, if a tribe got a bigger inheritance, a larger territory, they had to give more towns to the Levites. Smaller tribe, fewer towns. Makes sense, really.
It does. And scattering them like this, instead of giving them one big territory, what does that tell us?
Well, it seems significant. It kind of positioned them to serve the whole nation, didn't it? As teachers, priests, judges, they were within the other tribes.
Right, not isolated.
Yeah, and it probably fostered this interdependence. The Levites needed the tribes for their physical place, and the tribes needed the Levites for, religious guidance, legal stuff.
Okay, so that sets up the Levites.
Yeah.
And then flowing directly from this talk about towns, we get this other major concept, the cities of refuge.
Yes. This is maybe the most distinctive legal thing in this whole chapter.
It feels really key for how they managed conflict, maybe violence. So certain towns were specifically picked for this. Why? What was the point?
The main point was sanctuary, a safe place for someone who killed another person. But crucially, unintentionally, accidentally.
Okay, so if you didn't mean to do it.
Right. It was a refuge from the avenger of blood.
The Goas had him. Usually a relative of the person killed.
Typically, yeah. A close male relative who had this customary right, or maybe even an obligation, to avenge the death. Fleeing to a city of refuge basically hit pause on that immediate revenge.
So it buys time. It stops a potential cycle of violence right there.
Exactly. It provided a legal safe space, a way for the accused person to actually get a hearing, a trial, before the community assembly.
Okay, so it's a mechanism to ensure there's a process, not just summary justice or vengeance. How many cities were there?
6. 6 towns in total were designated for this.
And where were they? Spread out.
Yeah, strategically placed. 3 on the east side of the Jordan River, and then 3 over in Canaan itself once they crossed. The idea seems to be accessibility. No matter where you were, a city of refuge shouldn't be too far away.
That makes sense. And who could use them? Just Israelites.
No, and that's really striking. The text is explicit. These cities were for Israelites and for the aliens, the Jurim, and any other sojourners living among them.
Wow. So this protection, this due process element, it applied to everyone living in the land.
It seems so, which really underscores the importance of this whole system. But it all hangs on being able to tell the difference, right, between intentional killing and an accident.
Right. How does the text define murder? What makes it intentional?
It's quite specific. It focuses on intent, but also the means. Like if you strike someone with an iron object and they die, that's murder.
Yes. Stone or wood.
Yeah, stone or a wooden object, if it's big enough or used in a way that it could kill someone. Intent matters there. Also, things like shoving someone maliciously or throwing something at them with hostile intent, even hitting someone with your fist if it's done out of hostility and they die.
So the key factors are hostility, malice, intent to harm, or using something obviously lethal.
Pretty much. And the consequence for someone convicted of murder, it's stark.
They must be put to death.
Yes, the text repeats that. And it often mentions the avenger of blood carrying out that sentence if they encounter the murderer outside of any protective context.
Okay, so in contrast, what defines an accidental killing?
It's really defined by the lack of those things. No hostility, no prior enmity, no intent to harm. It's sudden, unintentional.
Like dropping something heavy by accident.
Exactly. Or, say, shoving someone but without any malice and they fall badly. Or maybe throwing something, not aiming at anyone, and it hits someone you didn't even see. The lack of intent is crucial.
So the system demands a real investigation into the circumstances, the state of mind. And this assembly you mentioned, they're the judges.
That seems to be the role. The Edda, probably the community elders or appointed judges, they'd convene, likely at the city gate, a common place for legal matters.
And their job is to hear the case.
Yes, to judge between the killer and the avenger of blood. They apply these definitions we just talked about.
Yeah.
If they decide, okay, this was accidental, their duty is then to protect the accused from the avenger.
Protect them hell.
By sending them back to the city of refuge they fled to, they ensure they get there safely.
Okay. And once they're in that city of refuge, safe from the avenger, what happens? They just live there.
Well, yes, but under a very specific and kind of strange condition.
Which is?
They must stay inside the boundaries of that city. They can't leave. Until the death of the current high priest, the one who was anointed with the holy oil.
Wow. That's specific. Tying the freedom of this person who killed accidentally to the lifespan of the high priest. What's the thinking there?
It's profound, isn't it? The high priest was the peak spiritual figure, the one who dealt with atonement for the whole nation, especially on Yom Kippur.
So his death is like a marker, a turning point.
Perhaps. Maybe it symbolizes a kind of national reset, or an expiation has occurred through his passing that somehow cleanses the situation, allowing the accidental killer to return without the land feeling, well, still polluted by that death. It connects their fate to the sacred calendar, in a way.
It links personal consequence to a national religious figurehead. That's fascinating. And the rule about staying inside the city limits, how strict was that?
Absolutely strict. The text is crystal clear. If the person leaves the designated boundary of the city of refuge before the high priest dies, yeah, then the avenger of blood is legally permitted to kill them. And crucially, the avenger would not be considered guilty of murder in that specific case. The city boundary was the absolute line of safety.
So leaving was taking your life into your own hands, literally.
Absolutely. Only after the high priest's death could they safely go back to their own property, their old life. And the text stresses, these aren't just temporary rules, these are legal requirements throughout the generation.
Wow. Okay, so that's the core refuge system. But the chapter adds a few more legal points too, right? About evidence.
Yes. Very important ones for capital cases, for murder trials. You couldn't put someone to death based on just one person's testimony.
The multiple witness rule.
Exactly. It explicitly requires more than one witness, a fundamental safeguard against false accusations or errors leading to the death penalty.
That's huge. And what about paying your way out of trouble? Could you offer money?
Absolutely not. That's another strict prohibition. No ransom, no kofar could be accepted for the life of a convicted murderer.
Life for life. That's the principle.
Yes, they must be put to death. And similarly, you couldn't pay a ransom to get someone out of a city of refuge early before the high priest died so they could go home.
So the process, including that waiting period, was non-negotiable, couldn't be bought off.
Correct. The integrity of the process tied to the high priest had to be maintained.
This whole legal framework feels really connected to, well, the land itself. There's this idea about pollution.
Yes, that's a powerful undercurrent throughout. The text explicitly states that bloodshed, especially murder, pollutes the land, defiles it.
So it's not just a crime against a person or even the community, but against the physical space they inhabit.
Exactly. It has this tangible, almost spiritual impact on the land. And the text says atonement for land polluted by blood can only be made
by the blood of the one who shed it.
Right. Which just reinforces the immense gravity of taking a life intentionally. The consequence is directly linked to undoing that defilement.
And the chapter wraps up by tying this all together with a final command, doesn't it?
It does. A very direct command. Do not defile the land where you live and where I dwell.
For I, the Lord, dwell among the Israelites.
Yes. It explicitly connects their actions, their justice system, the state of the land, directly to God's presence among them. Keeping the land pure through justice and accountability wasn't just a social necessity. It was essential because it was sacred ground, God's dwelling place.
So thinking about all this, what does it mean for you listening in? We've walked through Numbers 35, seeing these incredibly detailed rules, how the Levites were settled, the precise land measurements, this whole complex system distinguishing murder from accident, the unique cities of refuge that link to the high priest.
Yeah, it's a remarkable window into how this ancient society was envisioned to function. It grapples with very practical needs like where people live, but also deep principles of justice, social order, and the sacred.
And if you zoom out, think about the bigger picture. This ancient framework is wrestling with questions we still wrestle with, right? How do you balance justice, that cry for retribution, with mercy and making sure the process is fair?
Absolutely. How do you determine guilt when intent is the key factor? And this idea that our actions can impact our environment, our community, maybe even spiritually, that resonates too.
That whole city of refuge concept tied to the high priest, it's pretty unique.
It really is. It forces you to think about what refuge really means.
So here's something to chew on. How do societies, then and now, navigate that difficult line between deliberate harm and terrible accidents? What does it actually mean for a place or a system to offer real sanctuary? And how do we weigh that need for justice against the reality of unintended consequences?
Yeah, lots to think about there. Diving into these ideas of justice, refuge, atonement, consequences, it's all laid out in this foundational text.